I think sort of traditionally, leadership is expected. I think that's the part of the world that we would be. So people need to be able to trust and have confidence in you. They need to, I think, to understand where you're going and what the purpose is from there. And I think the last thing for me, probably on that, is stay humble with these things as well. We don't know everything. We never will. Things will change. And I think that ability to, this is not an ego game. This is never a, I'm right, you're wrong. This is about collecting the right people around.
Welcome to today's episode of SELINTalks, podcast initiative by SELINTalks, featuring Matt Topliss. An expert in international school leadership, Matt's deep expertise spans various educational systems and curricula, making him a valuable guide for current and aspiring school leaders. In our discussion, Matt will share actionable strategies for enhancing school leaderships, optimizing staff development, and fostering academic excellence. Whether you are refining your leadership skills or exploring international education trends, Matt's insights will provide you with the tools needed for success. Tune in to gain practical advice and learn how to navigate the challenges of international education with confidence. Without further ado, welcome Matt Topliss. Thank you so much for being here today, Matt. I hope you're having a great day. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm currently back in the UK, so battling a little bit with the changeable weather, but lots of cricket and lots of educational consultancy going on. So yeah, I'm very well, thank you.
Awesome. So before we begin with your journey, with all that you've done through your work, I would like to ask you an icebreaker question, is how we start actually. With your vast experience across various educational systems, if you could create a super curriculum combining elements from all the systems that you've worked with, what would some key features look like?
I've been really privileged to work in a number of different curricula, and I think the key thing with any curriculum is that it is contextually relevant to the students, the locality, the school, and the staff within that school as well. I think the key things for me are the curriculum is very student-centred. It has to be very interculturally aware as well. I think we live in a very diverse and very transient world now. Curriculum must be broad and balanced in its breadth as well, and have a number of different activities within that as well. But I think one of the things that come more into my sort of remit and interest of late has been, I think, an awareness of where young people are with their strengths and weaknesses and their areas of development. It's massively important that we empower our young people not only to be qualified, but to be successful as they go through their lives as well, and to give them a skill set and an awareness really of where they can go. Not only where they can go, but also potentially what to avoid as well, I think is absolutely crucial to it. So it's really important that we develop not only significant qualifications, knowledge, understanding, but also a skill set. And that super curriculum should really bring those opportunities out. We need performing arts, we need our sports in there. And we need to look, I think, very carefully at the skills that young people will have, the concepts that they can study, and not just the knowledge and understanding they'll pick up through, I suppose, content delivery as well.
True. Building on that idea of super curriculum, can you share your journey in international education? How did it begin, and what led you to become a principal and a consultant in diverse educational settings?
Yeah, I've been very privileged, I think, to work with some excellent school leaders right through my career. Right when I started back as a PE teacher, so a physical education teacher in the UK, I had a relatively normal university education in the UK. I made some very good links and associations, and then actually did struggle a little bit to get my first job, and I went on supply. So I actually did a sort of cover work in schools early on, and that gave me, I think, a really good grounding in the different types of schools, albeit they were all in the UK. But for about 6 to 8 months, I did a lot of supply work and moved from school to school. But it did give me a look at perhaps some of the schools that I wanted to be in, and perhaps some of the schools that I didn't want to be in as well. So it gave me that real understanding, I think, early on. Whilst I was working in the UK and in my first job, I was very privileged to be part of the Dreams and Teams program that was run by the British Council originally. So I actually had 2 trips to Thailand, one with students and one as part of sort of staff development as well. And that, I think, really gave me this sort of bug to teach and travel and make sure, I think, we were understanding different parts of the world and different educational contexts from there. That work then moved on further when I went to work for the Youth Sport Trust in the UK and looked at the way PE and sport can be used to raise attainment across a number of disciplines in schools. And worked with what was a large network of sports colleges and academies at that point who had sport as a specialism. And they were doing some fantastic work on the power of sort of the skill sets within PE and sport that we can translate into education as well. And that, I think, really gave me some different ideas. It gave me a different perspective on education. And then I was very privileged to work with a very strong school leader who had excellent experience, and I was a young deputy head at that point, sort of 33 years of age, very sort of wet behind the ears, if you sort of understand the phrase, and knew a lot, but knew that I needed to know much more, and worked in what was then the smallest academy in the UK, picked up a lot from that point. But the international stuff really sort of kicked in when I was there, because we were the first state school in the UK to become an IB world school. So we used the middle years program to, I think, generate some curriculum change and a change really of mindset. And that was a real whole school transformation piece for me. And at that point, I then became an IB consultant for NYP. I was on the group that rewrote some of the IB CP requirements and the elements of that as well. And it got me into an international mindset. And then I was able to go to Bahrain, into my first international job, then to Egypt, and then to Morocco. And all of those experiences have been very different. But what it has given me is excellent exposure through the likes of sort of the British Schools in the Middle East Organisation, Council of International Schools. I've worked for a large international schools group as well in that time. So it's been a very, very strong experience as to sort of the way I've developed things. And again, it has opened up opportunities, and it's opened up, I think, the opportunity for me to speak to like-minded colleagues, to be part of things such as this. But I think really to shape and understand my own leadership as well, and to, as I said, meet some very good people along the way and make a difference. People say to me in the UK, well, why are you international? What's the difference? There is no difference, really. I'm working with young people wherever that may be. I'm contextually understanding of where I am, and I fit my leadership to the way in which that school works, and actually the needs of the students and the stakeholders within the school. And that's a really important message that I think we'll come on to later when we talk about some of the sort of the advice we may give.
Right. That's a lot of traveling, I think, and a lot of exposure to a lot of different things in education altogether. That's amazing. Actually, your career reflects a very strong commitment into developing teaching and learning, both. How do you summarize your educational philosophy, and how has it evolved through your experiences with different curricula, as you mentioned, like IB, IG, CSC, and national curriculum?
In all of this, I think the development within any school has to be centered on the people that you have. And actually, I think it's incredibly hypocritical. We do a significant amount for the young people in our schools, but it's really important that we are putting the emphasis in on everybody in our school as well. And that curricular development and my educational philosophy is about value. It's about, I think, understanding who you have, understanding what I would call the WIFM, the what's in it for me, and really articulating that to different groups of stakeholders within the school as well. So really, what is in this for students? Why do they come to school on a daily basis? We need to understand that as school leaders, and we need to very much articulate that in a way that is and understand it in a way that then is progressive and takes things further forward. Obviously, you can't, as a school leader, do everything for everybody. But what
True.
you do need to look at is really clearly understanding what are the decisions that you need to make in the best interests of the people that you have. And those best interests of the people have to be your students first, then your staff, and then obviously we live in a competitive international market. We have to understand the needs of the parents as well. And really, my education philosophy, I think, really revolves around that value and that balance to make sure that everybody is understanding as well. The other side for me, very much a clear communicator. I think it's really important and easier for people to understand the purpose of the school, the purpose of the educational institution, if it's clearly explained to them. Give people the opportunity to listen, but I also think give people the opportunity to ask their questions and to understand that, because we also know that information is not always taken in on the first go. We need to be in a position, certainly with parents, to provide those opportunities. And I've been really, I think, supported by by things like the International Baccalaureate, by the national curriculum in the UK, and by sort of IGCSE and A-level. In terms of I think the materials, the partnerships that I'm able to make within those networks as well, to ensure that information is provided and that we can sit down and explain that very clearly. We can't take for granted that everybody knows all of those things, but it's certainly easier I think, to develop and make progress in schools if people are clear about where you're going and what their role in that success will be, and then they can take those decisions. And that's not always for everybody as well. There's a certain sort of honesty in some of those conversations as well, and especially when you pick up a new school. It's important that you articulate that very quickly, but at the same time, this is about, for me, establishing trust and confidence, which then allow us to, I think, speed the sort of process of change and the progress that we can make as well. So that's sort of my sort of all-encompassing philosophy, but it is centered. This is a people business, and that's the center that we have to have.
Awesome. You have actually successfully led both primary and secondary phases, is from what I understood from your profile as well. Could you discuss a particular challenge you faced while leading one of these phases, and how did you navigate it?
Yeah, I think like a lot of senior leaders and school leaders around the world, the COVID pandemic and the issues that caused for schools is probably the example that I would give. And I think focusing in on secondary, I was secondary trained originally. I've done a lot of work on my sort of primary knowledge, but I think my biggest asset with my primary staff is that I like to appoint people who know. I like to trust their expertise. But the COVID example, I think, is one that was very, very difficult for a lot of schools. We didn't know, there was no precedent for this. There was no, what do we do? There was no handbook for this. And I think we were able to navigate it through what I would discuss and sort of say and talk about is probably no decisions made in isolation. So there was a lot of consultation, even though a lot of that work was done remotely. And the example I'd give in secondary phase is simply about probably a silver lining that we found in the way in which we negotiated the examination grades for our older year groups, so years 11, 12 and 13, as it was then when I was working in Egypt. And we were able to, I think, really change a mindset. So what seemed like a crisis, the exam boards say to us, well, there's no exams and you need to provide evidence. But what seemed like a bit of a crisis at that point turned into a very, very strong opportunity for us. And that's my mantra. Even at the point of crisis, we need to look at what the opportunities might be from that point. And that's a really strong piece of advice that I would always give. So what we were able to do is to talk to staff and students about the process we were going through. This all comes back to effective communication. We were transparent in what we were trying to do. We wrote things down, but we also communicated it verbally. And we were able to then, I think, turn staff and student mindset to a much more, I suppose, a longer process that we went through, as opposed to students just probably not working perhaps as hard as they could do across the longevity of the course and then move through in the last 6 or 7 weeks and make significant progress. Staff needed to, I think about their pedagogy. They would think about the way they collected assessments when they did that. their connections with the students that they had. So it was a real change. But what I would say in that was that I was significantly supported by my head of secondary at that point, and the staff who bought into the process. And all of that, I think, comes from that trust and confidence that we've been able to establish in the past. The same with parents, because this is a very uncertain time for everybody. And most importantly, the same with students as well. We were able, I think, at that point to lay out a plan, clearly communicate it. We looked very clearly at points as to whether things were going where they should have done. But ultimately, we were successful. We were able to progress students through with the intended or perhaps actually better outcomes in certain cases. But the process was smooth. And then from that point on, students, I think, took a more holistic approach to their studies, as opposed to it'll be all right on the night and I'll just cram at the end and away we go. And that really helped us. And I think that helped staff with pedagogy, confidence in their assessment decisions as well. But this all comes back to communication, structure, and ability for us to implement that really, really quickly. But there was a team of us, and it worked really nicely for us.
That's actually amazing. That time was really, really hard for everybody, especially the people who were not, especially in the education setting, everything was uncertain to a point that every person who was even remotely associated with the education sector were getting affected. And rightly said, I think communication is the key, no matter where you were, no matter which position you're at. Very rightly said. Moving to a more personal aspect of school management, how do you approach safeguarding and pastoral care, especially in a diverse cultural setting of international schools?
Well, this is our number one priority wherever you are in the world. I think it's sort of twofold in there. I think you need to clearly understand the context that you're working in as well. If you're in a British school, as an example, you can lean on British schools overseas requirements as an example, but you do also need to be very aware of the cultural expectations and the legal expectations within the country that you're in as well.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest challenges I think I've had probably working overseas, which I didn't have in the UK, is that potentially as a school in many jurisdictions, you are on your own. So I suppose there's referrals within the UK as an example, but within other jurisdictions, it's very difficult to sort of put that in place. Again, we come back to the key theme here about the way in which sort of policy and practice is firstly designed. It's then communicated, and it's communicated to, again, all stakeholders with this. So it's really important that the students understand the sort of the protection that is in place for them, the expectations that they have. I've been very proud in a number of schools that I've worked in, almost, and it sounds a strange thing to say, about the number of children that are telling us about concerns that they have, or when they're worried about something, or those sort of things. So it really opened up a culture, I think, of an understanding of that mindset. We're not saying that we had every one of those was a child protection or safeguarding concern, but what we got staff and students into the habit of doing was, I think, being able to speak out, knowing the referral routes, and then having a very effective team who could then have had that extra training to, I think, make the decision on where that was. The training, I think, is really important. The workshop work that we did with parents as well. So very fortunate that I had a very strong team in Egypt who were able to put together a number of parental workshops around supporting your teenager, or issues with cyberbullying online, as an example, or whatever it might be. And parents' numbers were slow to start, but I look back now and see significant numbers on those workshops as well. This is all for me about raising awareness, but it's also very, very important that we understand the cultural context of what we're working in as well, and acting always, wherever we are in the world, in the best interest of the child, to make sure that every child, as much as we can do, comes to school happy, comfortable to be in school, and making sure, again, we are recruiting not only the right teaching staff, so through our safer recruitment expertise, but also the staff that are then supporting, so our counsellors, our heads of our pastoral staff, our heads of key stage. And a lot of this on the sort of pastoral side, I think, comes back into certainly reward. I'm very much a catch them in leader. We want to find young people being successful, what makes them successful, not, okay, you've got that wrong again. And really, again, bringing young people back to sort of that path as well. So we ran very sort of British ideas in international schools. So we would have a team around the child if we felt a child was not quite going where they should be at that point. We would involve parents in those conversations as well, and we would identify, is it an attendance issue? What's the reason for that attendance issue? Is it behaviour? Is it something that child needs some counselling for as well? Is it a learning support issue as well? Is it a language issue? So we would identify very, very clearly what potentially was sort of sidelining or steering the young person away from probably where we wanted them to be. And again, you trust the expertise that you have. You put in very, very strong procedures and feedback on that, and make sure that you develop a forensic understanding of every child that you have within your school. And that takes time, but that obviously starts as well with the teaching staff, who will see those young people perhaps far more regularly than we will as well. We put in all sorts of things around sort of bereavement counselling. We put in other bits and pieces on, I think, social emotional learning. So there's a proactive nature to all of this. So you're, in effect, I think, reaching 85% of the students in a proactive way, and then being probably more reactive with sort of 15-20% when things don't quite go as well. So a number of things in that, but that potentially sounds quite UK based. But I think as I've gone through various schools and leadership roles in different countries, I've been able to look very clearly at the I think what makes the difference potentially in those international schools, and really trying to understand the context and be nuanced, I think, in the way that we deal with these things.
There was a lot of mentioning of how the staff or the teachers or anybody who's involved, like the counselors, the teachers and everything, they ought to be trained, or they go through some kind of a training, right? When I'm seeing the trends that are happening in the world, there's a lot of talks and a situation that almost every school leader is facing is recruitment and retaining the high quality staff. Now, you are skilled in staff development. What strategies have you found most effective in recruitment as well as retaining the high quality staff in this? It is very competitive. Like we said, it's competitive for kids as well. As far as the schools are concerned, even the entire environment is competitive. So how do you fit all of those things in?
Well, I'm very proud of my retention record in Egypt. I think 2 years running off the back of COVID, we had about a 6 and 8% turnover in terms of staff. So we're obviously doing something right. And I think this comes back to value again. Yeah, I mean, it comes back to a way in which we value. I think it does come back to we ran a professional development program as well, which looked very clearly at getting, I think, a buddy system in place for staff to have a clear mentor, a teaching mentor. Now, what they would do with that is they would identify probably their strengths, where they were working well, and their areas for development. But instead of a number of people going in to observe their teaching, they would have one person who would observe them through the year and who would also buddy along with them. So they would notice and check in with them outside of those lesson observations as well. So people have all sorts of things away from school. We're very busy people in schools, but we have a life away from schools as well. Things don't always go right. And we would need, I think, then for people to really pick up on some of those things as well. So, and try and avert any further crisis or when people potentially may start to think about moving on. We'd already had those steps in place, I think, to make people where they were. So that focused in on what I think is core business in any school, which is teaching and learning. So we would ask people to, I think, look very critically at their own teaching. What do they want to develop? Is it their style of questioning? Is it the way they differentiate? Is it subject knowledge? And then we would put together a package of support that would put that in play as well. And that kept, I think it kept relationships where we wanted them. I think it kept the quality in the classroom, and therefore the student outcomes, I think, were very high because of that. So that value that we placed on that certainly supported us in terms of retention. And I start with retention because if you do keep as many people as we did, then recruitment is less of a concern to you.
True.
But our recruitment, I think, was again a very much a team effort, which worked. And I'm speaking probably more about Egypt than probably anything else. But I think with Egypt, I had full sort of school owner and director involvement in the recruitment process. I had HR. We had full sort of safer recruitment in place. We would use international recruitment fairs. We would do elements, I think, of sort of more one-to-one interviews. All of our safer recruitment training was in place. Our adverts were posted quite early, but not too early. So I think we were picking this up. And Egypt was not always an easier sell. And I think we were able to look very carefully at the positives of coming to our school, the positives of coming to Egypt as well. And really then talk about the staff development that we would put in place as well. So that transparency again was there. There's another key part to this. I think we would interview people, we would appoint them, and then we would keep in touch with them as well. We had in-school buddies, so your sort of phase leader or your department leader, as well as then somebody who was a sort of an external buddy as well, who would talk you through perhaps how the culture worked, where the best places to live were. And we also had quite an involved and developed induction, which a number of schools obviously do have. But this allowed us, I think, to really celebrate what our school was. I think it allowed interaction and involvement from a number of levels. So our founders would be part of that process as well. And then once staff were in, we then had a number of sort of wellbeing activities as well. I was always conscious of sort of, did we all, a good example of sort of, is this meeting an email instead of that, or can we give some time back here and there? So it's really important that we understood that people were human beings, that they had other parts of their lives to sort out as well. And not just, I think just sort of that everything was in on education at that point. So it is about value, and it is about the power of voice and empowerment as well. Bringing staff in, I think, for sort of school improvement planning, having their feedback on that as well, giving them a voice. But again, developing that awareness that not everything staff want or think we can put in play. Sure. Because at that point, we were dealing with a school of 1,500 students and roughly 150 staff. So you've got to look very carefully at how that empowerment comes. So those are just a few tips. I mean, we actually laid all this out. So we had a recruitment and retention calendar as well. So we knew who was doing what, when, what the responsibilities were. And even simple things. I would go to the airport to collect the new staff when they came in, as an example.
Oh, wow.
We would make sure they were settled in. We had welcome events, so we would felucca rides on the Nile, those sort of bits and pieces, dinners when we really got people settled, and then again when people were in as well. We would have a group iftar as an example, and we would celebrate other festivals as well. So it was all there, but it did get the staff together, and it demonstrated the value that we placed on that.
There's a lot of harmony, and I really love the idea that you shared, that there's a support system, like the buddy. You usually hear buddy system for kids, but having buddy system for teachers and staff, and somebody who's just coming in and all of that, that's a very different approach to things. Obviously, it's preparing you for certain things. It is also giving an open communication to feedback mechanism, I think. And I mean, all of the dinners and everything, I think it makes them feel belong belonging, the sense of belonging actually comes into place. And that's very important. No matter wherever we are, whatever we are doing, that puts things into perspective actually.
That's exactly right. The word you use there, belonging, is exactly
Yeah.
what we want. I also feel that we want core business for teaching staff is to develop good relationships, teach as well as they can, supervise, and really get into that as well. So we need to put that sort of, I suppose, that support network in behind them to enable them to be in school. And again, things like language barrier, visa runs, those sort of bits and pieces. Again, the sort of legal side of being in another country is very important. And I don't ever want to put my staff in a position where they may do something that is not culturally acceptable, and then put themselves in perhaps an embarrassing position or whatever. So it is up to us to enable staff to understand the context they're in, and as quickly as possible to hit the ground running when they're in the classroom with students.
That is so important. I mean, people, as humans, we can make mistakes, things can happen. But induction part of it that you mentioned is very, very crucial. I really also appreciate the fact that there has been, like you mentioned, like picking up them from the airport and arranging certain things. Those things really, even if they might just seem very small thing to do, but these small little things actually build up to the kind of relationships that you're building up with your staff, with your teaching staff, and all of this. Looking ahead, what are some of the projects or initiatives you are excited about in the coming years, and how do you plan to integrate your experience in these new ventures?
Yeah, I would. I'm very excited at the moment. I'm in the process of sort of getting myself ready to go to lead an international school in Kyoto in Japan. So
We heard.
a real step away from perhaps my previous experience as well. But I think the opportunity there is to look at what is a very established school that has a number of opportunities to take this forward. It's in the process of a sort of a small transformation in terms of perhaps program development, campus development as well. There's been some quite very supportive injection of investment, but also expertise as well. So it's a really good time to go into this school as well. So that's probably my day job initiative. But I'm always keen to continue to move myself on as well. So as I mentioned earlier, the chartered teacher status as well. I'm in the process now of completing my accredited performance coach training as well, my accreditation there, and that's been incredibly informative, working with To Be Limitless, who actually are owned by a former PE teaching colleague of mine. But the opportunity not only to reconnect with him, but to meet people from other sectors of industry as well, to see how things are progressing there, to pick up a new skill set as well, because the coaching work, I think, is crucial. I want to move away in my schools from just talking to people about curriculum or assessment. I want to talk to them about them, or them actually to talk to me about them, which is the better way of going with it. And that's the crucial scenario for us. And not only my teaching staff, but my students as well. So developing a really clear understanding of who you are, where you're going, what you need to get to that point as well. And that coaching element will really come through. And again, as we've said, that plays well into retention, it plays well into recruitment, it certainly plays well into student recruitment and student outcomes as well. So all of these things are really important to me. And I think my experiences have brought me to this point, and I've been able to learn from very strong experiences, but also those experiences that perhaps didn't go as well as I'd wanted. I'm very minded now when I go to Japan that it's crucial that I have a clear plan as to what success looks like for me in terms of perhaps first 100 days. What are we trying to move on in those areas as well? But no, this has been a very good point in time for me. A slight gap in my school leadership has allowed me to look really carefully at myself, my other interests, and potentially where I can use some of these new initiatives to drive the development within Kyoto International School, which will always, the school I work in will always be the priority, but the extra bits around it will be there to add value to that school experience for students and for staff as well. And that a lot of this coaching work works really well and fits really well with the IB philosophies. And this is an IB all through school. So PYP, MYP, and we're going to add the diploma program at this point. So all of that, those ideas will certainly move to benefit and develop that school further, but at the right time, the right pace, and definitely in the right context.
That's amazing. We're excited for you. When I heard that this is what, like, you're going through a transition and everything, I was just thinking, how are you going to make time for the podcast and other things that we are getting ahead with? But all the best for your, journey. I'm sure it's going to be exciting, and there's a lot of things that is coming your way. So last but not the least, as someone who has mentored heads of schools and mentors actually heads of schools and other leaders, what's one piece of advice you consistently find yourself giving to up and coming education leaders?
I think you've got to know and understand and value the context that you're in. And that comes from a number of sort of methods. But the key thing in any school is to listen, is to look. It's not about us as school leaders going into schools and really driving on with perhaps a predetermined agenda that we have.
Sure.
On top of that, though, it's really important that we don't wait too long to lead. And certainly when I've led in the Middle East as well, I think sort of traditionally leadership is expected. I think that's the part of the world that we would be. So people need to be able to trust and have confidence in you. They need to, I think, to understand where you're going and what the purpose is from there. And I think the last thing for me, probably on that, is stay humble with these things as well. We don't know everything. We never will. Things will change. And I think that ability this is not an ego game. This is never I'm right, you're wrong. This is about collecting the right people around you to take that further forward. And I think my ultimate dream eventually is that somebody will say to me, would you like to come and run this school or that school? And I will say yes. And can I bring my team? Because I have been able to develop a very strong set of people from all of the schools that I've worked in. And I, excuse the phrase, but I'd quite like to get the band back together at some stage and really take that further forward. So you never know when you're going to need people. Stay humble, talk to people, but listen, and pick up the context immediately.
That's amazing. That's actually very amazing. I love the phrase, though, bringing the band together. That's good. Also, thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute delight knowing that there is so much that you've been doing and you still had time for us for this. And there's a lot of experiences that really needs to go out and spread. So thank you so much for being here and all the very best for your journey ahead in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you this morning, and thanks for the time and the opportunity.
Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap on our insightful discussion with Matt. We have unpacked a treasure trove of strategies for successful international school leadership. Thanks to Matt, now we have a clearer vision on how to enhance education environments and empower both staff and students on a global scale. We hope you're walking away with new ideas to implement in your own education leadership journey. Remember, the world of international education is vast and full of opportunities, just waiting for innovative leaders like you to step forward. Thanks for tuning in and keep leading with passion and creativity. Until next time, keep steering through the thrilling landscape of education with the zest of a true pioneer. See you in the next episode of SELINTalks.